Oh, hi there. Ollie Anderson here. You're listening to Creative Status. If this is the first time you've discovered this podcast, well, welcome. Ultimately, what we talk about over here is how the creative process is about the journey towards wholeness. That means that we're growing more real, authentic, and true to ourselves and in our relationship with reality by allowing the unconscious to become conscious and ultimately integrating all of the parts of ourselves we may have been hiding from, learning new things that are going to take us closer to the edge of what we currently know and to get new insights about how to be a real human being, basically. Everybody else, if you've heard the podcast already and you've returned, then thank you for coming back. Hope life is good today and that you're ready for this interview. Today I'm talking with Leke Asong. Leke is a GP. That's a general practitioner here in the UK. And ultimately, he has a lot of really interesting and amazing things to say about health in general and the way that our attitude of being either real or unreal will affect the choices that we make and the lifestyle that we live and the health that we have or the natural state of health that we're connected to based on all of those things. There's some really interesting stuff in here about the choices that we make as individuals, but also there's a kind of underlying theme about how the health services and health systems in general kind of set us up for picking up a bunch of misconceptions and false ideas about what health really is. It's really interesting if you're somebody like me who has to spend loads of time in hospitals and going to see doctors and all that kind of stuff because you have some kind of health condition. But ultimately, if you listen to this conversation, it's hopefully going to motivate you, it's going to inspire you to make some better choices, and you're going to be able to return or get on the path to returning to, if you're not there, your state of natural vitality and well-being. So Leke, thank you so much for the insights that you've shared here. Everybody else, see you next Monday for another episode of Creative Status. Hope this helps you, and thanks so much. Here we go. Boom. Oh, hi there, Leke. Thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Creative Status. We've had a brief conversation previously where I rambled at you and threw all kinds of wild theories in your direction. Basically, I think what we're going to be talking about today is foundational approaches to health and how we can be more creative to some extent, but how we can ultimately take a real approach to the way that we live and relate to ourselves at the levels of our health. Before we get into all that, have you got anything that you would like to say? Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what you're all about and what you do?
Yes, thank you so much, Ollie, for having me on the podcast. My name is Leke. I'm a GP, functional medicine doctor, and wellness consultant. So I'm essentially an NHS GP, and I also see patients privately through Gut Health Medic, my company, and I use a functional medicine approach, meaning it's a more holistic or alternative way of looking at health, and I really focus on chronic disease management, especially the gut and achieving optimal health.
Wow. So one thing that I really liked about your work when I was kind of looking into it is that a lot of what you seem to be doing is helping people to kind of reconfigure their lifestyles so they can kind of return to a more natural way of living or a natural way of relating to themselves. Is that a fair assessment before I start grilling you about that? Is it fair to say you're just helping people get back to where they should already be?
Yeah, I'll say that's a fair assessment. I think especially when we're dealing with chronic disease, it's all about achieving balance, and you can do that. Well, you can't do that without changing a lifestyle and your eating habits and things like that. So yeah, that's the main aim.
Like one thing that I like to do when I'm thinking about all these different issues is to simplify it by looking at it in terms of either wholeness or fragmentation. So for me, I think we all have a natural drive towards more wholeness in ourselves and in the way that we relate to the world, and at a slightly deeper level, in the way that we relate to reality itself, whatever that means to people. I think with the health thing, if we're being fragmented, i.e., that we've got all kinds of complications and friction in ourselves, then it just ends up causing us to make unreal, unhealthy choices. So maybe as a springboard to get this conversation opened up a little bit, can we say that a lot of the health issues people seem to have, in your experience as a GP, comes down to the choices that they make, but on a slightly deeper level, choices that are not necessarily aligned with their actual nature? I know that's a kind of big question, but what do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. A huge proportion of pathologies or diseases, I would say, are lifestyle dependent. I'm talking of chronic disease again. I mean, acute disease are different. But for example, obesity or diabetes, high blood pressure, IBS, things like this, a lot of it depends on our kind of choices we make. And that upsets the body's natural balance. And once the body goes out of balance, you get a cascade of symptoms, and then that just spirals out of control. And unfortunately, conventional medicine is mainly symptomatic treatment. So once you treat one symptom, the body just readjusts and throws up another symptom. So you end up just chasing symptoms as opposed to fixing the root cause of the problem.
Like, this is something that I find really interesting. So this kind of fascination, I guess, that we have with symptoms instead of the fundamental problem, whatever that might be, it kind of feeds into what we've been saying about the wholeness fragmentation thing. Because the way that I understand it is the fundamental problem always has something to do with the whole system, seeing the body as a whole system, the mind as a whole system, it's all connected. And if we're just focusing on the symptoms, well, that is obviously a fragmentary approach to dealing with whatever issue that you have, but also it's ultimately about the illusion of control as well. Because I think symptoms, they're easier to control in the short term. But like you said, if you're not dealing with the fundamental problem, you give a pill or whatever it is, and one symptom disappears, but something else will pop up elsewhere because you're not digging deep enough into what's actually going on. So my question is another kind of deep curveball question maybe, but why do you think our tendency as a culture or as a society or whatever is to deal with the symptoms more than the fundamental problem? Is it an economic thing because it's, I don't know, big pharma or whatever it is, just want people popping pills? Or is it because of the way we like to control things and it gives us a sense of control dealing with the symptoms in such an easy way? What's going on there where we focus on just the superficial surface level instead of diving a bit deeper?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. I think, the first reason is, I think, a cultural one, as independent of medicine, is just we want quick results. We want things fast. So, for example, there are lots of apps out there, and there's Amazon Prime, and people want things now. So they don't want to wait. So, yes, symptomatic control is a quick thing. You get quick results, like a quick fix. The second reason is probably, in terms of medicine, is just the training we get in medical school. We don't really, it's a medical model. We don't really look at the interrelationship between the various body systems. We do it to a degree, but not beyond a certain point. So,
wow.
and that leads to even fragmentation in terms of specialties. For example, it's a neurologist, there's a gastroenterologist, there's a gynecologist. Some of those specialties make sense, but some don't from the point of view of the body. And the third reason is just how things are structured. For example, a GP's consultations are 10 minutes in length. So that automatically forces you to be able to hone in on one thing and get a quick result.
Mm.
Because if, for example,
Wow.
you had a 1 hour consultation or half an hour, that kind of makes you dig deep a bit more.
Mm.
If you've got 10 minutes and you've got 40 people to see a day, then
Mm.
you are going to go to the quickest thing and in and out. It's almost like conveyor belt medicine.
Mm.
So, and then I think another point would be the education we get as doctors. There's very little nutritional education in medical school. So
Mm-hmm.
that could be a way to tackle the root cause. But a doctor could say, eat healthy or exercise, but that's not specific enough. What does eat healthy mean? It could just mean anything. So, so to get the quickest result is the quickest symptomatic control, in and out, and next person. And like I say, we've got 30 or 40 people a day minimum to see as GP. So you can't go too deep with one patient. You'd never finish.
Wow. So really, it's just it's a structural problem, but it's been normalized because we're just so used to thinking that the symptoms are all we need to deal with. And it's almost like most people aren't even aware that the biomedical model and its kind of mechanistic approach to kind of fixing people like their cars in a mechanic's garage or something, they don't realize that there is a much deeper level. And I suppose, could we say that another part of that is that when it comes to their health, most people have either been conditioned or they just don't want to believe that ultimately it's their responsibility. Maybe I'm being a bit cynical, but the way that the medical system seems to work is that people have health issues, things pop up, and because they're afraid or they just lack knowledge or whatever it is, they want to put their trust in some external authority that can just say, right, take this pill, do this intervention, and then everything will be fine. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. But actually, the fundamental problem almost always goes back to their relationship with themselves at some level.
Absolutely. That's the point I totally forgot to mention. Because if, for example, a doctor tried to say, look, you need to change your lifestyle, you need to do this, you need to do that. A huge proportion of patients are not really interested. I tried that for years and many times just failed. They want a quick tablet. Can I just take this tablet and solve the problem? So with this lot of talk about waiting lists and not enough doctors, I think we could double the amount of doctors and the problems would still remain. I think, like you said, it's really about educating people that it is your responsibility. There is a quote that says 80% of health happens outside the doctor's office. So, you need to take care of your body. You need to eat well. You need to exercise. You need a healthy lifestyle. You need to supplement when needed. Yeah. So once the public realize this, then things get easier because you can't entrust all your health with the doctor. That's just the fundamental factor of it all, unfortunately.
Do you think, in a way, this kind of tendency that people have to kind of want to kind of pass all of the responsibility on to the doctor is just a way of avoiding that fundamental issue, which that ultimately is our responsibility, is up to us. And in a strange kind of way, the medical system is almost built around distracting people from that fundamental truth. I don't know if you have you heard of the drama triangle in transactional analysis?
No.
It's just it's quite a simple model of just how people interact. Let's just say, for brevity, and it's a triangle, obviously. So there's three things on there, but it has victims, rescuers, and persecutors, and these are all kind of roles that you can fall into. And so a lot of the time, I think patients end up playing the victim. So they're like, poor me, blah blah blah. They go see the doctor who's supposed to rescue them. And then out there in the world, there's the illness, which is the persecutor, I guess, in this particular drama triangle. But if the system is built around those kind of interactions, then it's always going to be avoiding the truth to some extent. And it seems like, to me at least, that is how the system, the medical system for physical health issues, but also the mental health system as well, seems to be structured. And in a way, I don't know if it's because of funding and all this kind of stuff, but to me, I think it's causing problems that people aren't even necessarily aware of because of the things you just said.
Very good point. So I went to a conference, I think about 3 years ago, and there was Dr. Unwin, a GP as well, and he talks a lot about diabetes and reversing diabetes. And he mentions a story how he was told in medical school that diabetes is a progressive and irreversible condition.
Mm,
And that tends to be the kind of diagnosis with many chronic diseases in medical books. They kind of say it's progressive and irreversible, so it's going to get worse. So it's almost like a negative view of it. Because if you tell someone's progressive and irreversible, then control is almost out of their hands because they think that's the condition I've got. It's progressive and irreversible. There's nothing I can't do about it. But actually, you can do things about it. So if doctors think something is progressive and irreversible, then they're transmitting that kind of knowledge to the patient. So the patient automatically from day one feels helpless. Says, look, I've got told I've got diabetes. It's going to get worse. I'm just going to take tablets forever. But if you told a patient, actually, you've got diabetes, a lot of it depends on what you're eating. I mean, we're talking type 2, for example. A lot depends on what you're eating. If you exercise, you're going to improve your insulin sensitivity. If you eat the right foods, you'd lower your sugar and your diabetes could actually reverse. Then that's a different discussion. The patient would think, oh, wow, I can do something about it.
Yeah.
So it depends on how you tackle it and how you look at it. That changes everything.
Yeah. Like I've thought this myself. Like I've had some health issues in the past, and I realized that the way the conversations are usually framed is it's always about what you can't do. So you can't eat this anymore. You can't do this. You can't do that. It's all very negative in the way that you've just said. But actually, if you can make the mental shift to focusing on what you still can do, then you'll realize actually, whether you've got a health issue or not, you can still have a lot of control. You can still flow with life and do all the things that you want to do, or a lot more than they may initially make you believe. And so that assumption that is built into the way that conversations are had and the way that there's the drama triangle, I think a lot of the time it just causes people to identify in a way that is actually bad for their health. And so I guess that's a good segue into something I wanted to ask you about, which is how do you think, and this is another curveball big question, so apologies, but how do you think the way that people identify in general can either have a positive or negative impact on their health, and returning to the natural state of vitality and freedom, that's how you described it on your website, that we can all kind of have when we're, aligned with the real version of ourselves?
Identify in terms of, in what way, for example?
So if you take the drama triangle thing, for example, if you're, if you see yourself as being in a completely helpless situation and that your days are numbered, and and that you're just fixed, maybe like you don't have a growth mindset, so you're just stuck in a certain state. I think a lot of the time people are filtering their relationship with their health through an unreal kind of identity. And actually, if you can kind of crack that open and start moving again, then in general, you'll return to that vitality and freedom. That's how I've experienced it anyway.
Yeah, I think this is kind of in the realm of mindset and mental health. I think things sometimes happen for a reason, and I look at certain things that happen as a character building experience. I think sometimes we have such a negative view in society, and we think, oh, this has happened to me, and this has happened to me, I'm helpless. But actually, you could just change it around and say, this is happening to me because I'm moving forward, and that's why I'm getting these obstacles. I need to go around it and not be pulled down by it. And that can make a big impact, because the moment you start thinking, oh, I'm a victim, then you can end up with depression and just feel I'm helpless and things always happen to me all the time. And I was talking to a friend of mine actually a few days ago, And this was in the realm of business, although in a way it has some relevance to what we're talking about. And he was saying in America, you could fail 5 or 6 times in business and someone would still hire you.
Wow.
But in England, if you'd failed once or twice, they'll look at you in a different way. So maybe in America, the thing is a go getting mentality. So if he fails 7 times, he's always going for it. So he's a good person to have. But maybe they might think, oh, in England's failed, so he's not good at it. So is that kind of shift of mindset to say, look, you fail is not a problem. You need to fail to get better, and that's just how life is.
Like, I think that's the bigger issue of the identity thing. So, like, reality just works in a certain way. So people are going to fail, for example. That's one obvious thing that's going to happen. It's just part of reality. It's not a reflection on people. It's just something that can happen. Obstacles are going to arise, trials, tribulations, blah, blah, blah. People are going to have health issues and all this kind of stuff. But no matter what happens, I think, like you said, you can use it to keep learning, keep growing, keep expanding. And actually, if you want to get a bit spiritual about it or whatever, you can turn even the most challenging obstacles into something that is going to make you more connected to yourself and more connected to life. So I'm speaking from personal experience. In my life, I had like a chronic disease. I still got it. I had kidney failure. So I'm on dialysis. And at first, I went through this whole process. I've been depressed and everything. But then in the long run, it actually turned out to be a blessing. And I really mean that in the strongest possible sense, because it just taught me so much about life. It taught me so much about what I can do and all these different amazing things that you can learn. And so for me, I can totally understand what you're saying when you say that. And I think the culture is kind of against that. So earlier on, when I was saying, the medical system will just tell you, you can't do this, you can't do that. That was my experience. As soon as you get a health issue, they start wrapping you in eggshells, and basically that's it. You're supposed to roll over and just die and have this treatment until you do. But actually, if you focus on what you can do, you can still have an amazing life. And ultimately, the only thing that stopped me from understanding that initially was my identity, because I was holding on to an old version of myself, a conditioned version of myself. And once I let that go and was able to rebuild in alignment with what was actually true and start dealing with the fundamental problem, which was my relationship with myself, then, I became happier than ever, and my life is amazing because I was able to move instead of just being caught up in my head. So anyway, that's me rambling about that. But with the reality thing, let's say, let's open it up to that. And again, this is another curveball, so I'm just throwing all these curveballs at you. Sorry, but do you think there are kind of natural laws that we need to be aware of in order to make the most of our health? So one example of a natural law I found is just the law of cause and effect. So our current state of health is ultimately an effect of the cause of our relationship with ourselves and the choices that we make and blah, blah, blah. And if you understand that, well, you can make better choices and be a better cause, so you get better effects. So if people understand that, it can make a massive difference to their lives. But is there anything else like that you think people need to be aware of?
For optimal health sort of thing?
Yeah, just kind of, I suppose, almost universal kind of things that apply to everybody.
Everyone. Okay, I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely are. So I would say, 3 categories, which would be nutrition, lifestyle, and that would be movement, and supplementation. So nutrition, I would say everyone's got to avoid processed foods because they're full of refined carbohydrates, full of refined vegetable oils, and high in sugar. So that's bad for everyone. Lifestyle change, we really need to move more. It doesn't have to be exercise. It could just be moving. It could just dance. It could be walks. So being in connection with nature is so important. So a walk in the park or in a nice field or in the forest even is very good for you.
Mm,
And supplementation, I think we all have to, because modern lifestyles cause nutritional depletion, and
mm,
some of the food
mm,
we eat are not really that good. So we need to replenish some of the vitamins and minerals we're missing out on. And yeah, you need to be spiritually healthy. I think also having a good, healthy connections are so
mm,
important. Like during lockdowns, people were really depressed and felt really low. So we need to talk to each other, meet people, go out for walks, drinks with people is really important. So a sense of communication is so important. And I think service to others is really, really
wow.
important. When we help others, we really help ourselves.
Mm, that's amazing. Um, with the things you just said, do you think it's fair to say that a lot of those things are ultimately just about returning to human nature? So
Yeah.
when people talk about, human beings in society these days, it's almost always as though the cultural narrative anyway is that the nurture comes before the nature. But
Yeah.
actually, the nature, this is just my view, but like I think the nature has to come first. And a lot of those things you said, like avoiding processed foods and moving your body and remembering that we're tribal creatures and we're mammals, and so we need to touch other people and hang out with them and all that kind of stuff. And the service thing is kind of linked as well. Um, do you think it is ultimately about that? Like the modern world
Hmm.
has kind of taken us away from our nature. And so that's caused us to make unhealthy choices. And returning to health is ultimately about returning to nature to some extent.
Yeah. I think the very nature of our modern lifestyles, yes, has done that. We can use some technology to bridge the gap, but
Mm, mm,
for some reason it just makes things worse. For example, like there are friends I've just talked to them on WhatsApp for years and I've never really met them, but meeting them changes everything. For example, if
mm,
you meet them
mm,
face to face and just have a laugh, it's completely different to
mm,
just
mm,
messaging them all the time. So yeah, in a way, technology has caused us to be more distracted as well. So we're not living in the moment. If you go to a concert, for example, people have got the smartphones out and they're just filming it. But actually, if you just put the smartphone away and enjoy the music, enjoy the guitars and the drums, it's a different experience than trying to get the best shot.
mm, mm.
Yeah, so sometimes it causes distractions. And yeah, I think
Well,
we're designed to walk around, we're designed to sit for long, for hours in offices and stuff like that. So yeah, by the very nature of society now, we're
mm,
kind of moving away from how we're designed to be.
100%. Do you think what you just said about distraction is kind of a good way to understand all of this? So, in a way, the modern world is just, in general, one big distraction. Like it's just a bunch of different fragments in terms of what we're saying about wholeness and fragmentation. There's just all
Yeah.
these fragments pulling us away from just being present in ourselves and in life. So people working in sedentary jobs, basically sat down all day in front of a computer, distracting themselves with spreadsheets. They go home, they sit down, distract themselves with Netflix. When they communicate with people, it's not face to face, like you said, it's another kind of digital distraction. Like all of that stuff, ultimately, it can be used for good. Like obviously, people need jobs so they can pay the bills and all these kind of things. But the way that we're going about things is very unreal, I think. And I think also it's affecting people's health, which is probably why chronic disease is going up more than ever, and all this kind of stuff, depression, anxiety, even though, the technology is better than ever and we got more medication and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think 2 months ago, I've had two consultations like this where I phoned a gentleman and he says, "It's all right. My problem is sorted. I just realized I was on my smartphone all the time." Yeah, it's a true story. And he's like, "Yeah, no worries about it. It's all sorted." So yeah, I've had two of such
Wow.
consultations. We're on our phones all the time and we're distracted. And yeah, even some of the ADHD and stuff where the parents bringing I think it's got ADHD. but it's got a TV in his room. It's got a smartphone half the time. Got the Nintendo thing going on. So yeah, all the time it's on the screen. So it's gonna end up with a problem.
Yeah. Like I've spoken to so many people recently that have just self-diagnosed themselves with ADHD. Like it's
Yeah,
a
it's
bit
so
of a
common now.
yeah. Like why do you think that is? Like everybody, not everybody, but so many people are just saying, right, I've got ADHD. I don't know if it's a fashionable thing or it's just another way of avoiding responsibility in the way we were talking about. Like what do you think's going on there?
Yeah, good question. So this every day I get about 2 or 3
Wow.
in the last
Yeah.
6 months, really. Yeah, it's like a normal thing now. I think I've got ADHD. I think I've got ADHD.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the first reason is communication. I mean, if someone goes and says, "Oh, I think I've got ADHD," and the doctor says, "I think you have it," they might
Mm,
go to the pub and talk to their friends. Friends, "Oh yeah, do you know? I think I have it."
yeah.
So people talk amongst each other. Then they think, "Oh, I think I've got it." So
Wow.
if you go to Google and put all the information in with any disease, anything you look at always seems like something you have. It's just how
Yeah. Yeah.
these algorithms are. Be like, yeah, I think I've got gallbladder disease. Well, you haven't. So yeah, it's almost like a bias because you think you have it, so you're looking for a
Mm,
reason to have it. So you're going to end up thinking you have it. The second reason is, I think, yeah, people are so distracted and they're just not disciplined enough. So they're looking for a reason to
mm,
explain why they're not achieving or why they're not concentrating or why they're behaving the way they are. So
mm.
it's easier for them to say, look, I think it's because I've got this pathology and that's why I'm
Wow.
reacting in this manner.
Yeah.
And the third reason, this is really a weird one, but it could be like a benefits thing because
Mm, mm.
some people get like PIPs payments and all this stuff. So yeah, I've heard kind of parents looking for diagnosis for their children because, sadly they're going to claim and they're going to get money from the
Wow.
government. So yeah,
Yeah. Like,
so they kind of try to get the diagnosis, yeah, for
mm,
monetary purpose, which is, not a good thing at all. But
wow.
some people do that.
Like, actually, that's amazing in a way. And like, that's kind of linked to a question I was about to ask you. So, with some labels, it's almost as though we value having a label more than actually being healthy. If do you know what I mean? And so, even though you would think that one of the best feelings in life is being in a natural state of health and having energy and vitality and being free to do what you want, for some reason, and we've alluded to some of them already, um, people actually go out there trying to find labels that they can attach to that
Mm-hmm.
will actually give them a reason to keep identifying in a way that they're comfortable with, or to justify certain shortcomings or whatever it is that they perceive themselves to have, without actually, doing the work, let's say, of turning inside themselves and cultivating discipline or whatever qualities it is that they need to develop. Is that something that you've seen with other labels? So not just ADHD, but are they, I don't know if you want to answer this question, but are they things like that that seem to happen a lot?
Yeah, I think
Wow.
generally speaking, people like labels.
Mm. Yeah.
um, so yeah, they could say, "I think I have depression," or "I think I'm depressed," or because in a way it explains some of the stuff. And some people are depressed. Don't get me wrong. I mean, depression is a real diagnosis,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes it could just be life hardship. It could just be, you've broken up with your partner.
Mm-hmm.
People come in, "Oh, I've broken up with my boyfriend or my girlfriend 3 days ago and think I'm depressed." Well, I try to tell them you're not, because it's just a natural reaction. You are going to feel sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not depression.
Wow.
I think social media in a way also propagates it, like on
Mm.
TikTok and all these apps. Sometimes a
Mm.
certain diagnosis might be fashionable and people want to talk about, my depression and kind of tell their story. And maybe they're not depressed, but they think it's probably the
Wow.
fashionable thing to do. There's an element of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but sometimes
Wow.
it could be people looking for an answer. I'll give you an example. If a patient's got, let's say, brain fog and aches and pains and
Mm-hmm.
unexplained, it's so-called medically unexplained
Yeah.
symptoms,
Yeah.
and they have all the tests are normal, then the doctor might say you're depressed because the doctor doesn't really know the reason.
Mm.
Or the patient might be happy to say, I think I found a reason why I'm feeling this way, because that
Mm.
way it's
Mm.
good to have some sort of answer.
Mm.
Because if you had all the tests in the world, seen all the
Wow.
consultants, and all of them said, well, there's nothing wrong with you,
Mm.
then that's even more, in a way, frustrating. Because they say, look, I've seen all the best people, and how come there's nothing wrong with me? But if someone
Mm.
convinced them and said, I think you're depressed,
Mm.
depression can cause aches and pains. Depression can cause mood swings,
Mm.
or
Mm.
then, oh yeah, I finally found the reason.
Wow.
And that's why, in a way, I got into functional medicine, because I saw lots of patients like this,
Mm.
and just strange symptoms. I've seen all these consultants, all these people, and sometimes they just told you were depressed.
Mm.
But in some cases, very smart or alert patients will say, I don't think I'm depressed. I think, I've got a good family, my work is fine, I'm just not depressed at all. But for years, I saw these strange pathologies, and I thought, what's going on with them? And my GP trainer at the time says, well, they're just medically unexplained. And some of the consultants just said, see your GP. So that's how I ended up down this path, due to personal reasons as well. But a lot of it was, I just thought, there's got to be a reason why these patients are feeling like this. I'm going to find the answer. So I
Mm.
stumbled across functional medicine. That's how.
Wow. Like in what you've just said, there's so many kind of interesting threads, and like they're all kind of related to some of the things you said. Like one thing that's really interesting there about the labels thing, it goes back to what we were saying about the kind of conversations people are having in the medical system. And so a lot of the time the conversation is framed by people just not being able to deal with uncertainty. And so again, that goes back to the laws of reality and how we can navigate, just reality itself. And the default state of existing in the world is uncertainty. But the medical system and the conversations that take place there are kind of framed on certainty, or the idea of certainty, and the truth by authority almost of the doctors and the consultants and all this kind of stuff. It's almost like a lot of the time the patients, when they're in that kind of victim state, especially, they're looking up for someone to rescue them, and they actually need the doctors or the medical team to be completely omniscient, to know everything, to be completely omnipotent, and to be able to, save them from anything. But that is not actually how life works. I always think if doctors really were omniscient, then nobody would have any health problems, because obviously we'd be able to solve them. And so, because we don't like uncertainty, this thing
Yeah.
we've said about labels is actually just a way of, it's almost like putting a band-aid on. It's giving the illusion of certainty in an uncertain situation. And so once you've got that label, you don't have to ask any more questions. You don't have to worry as much. But the downside of that is that actually you might not be dealing, like we said, with the fundamental problem, which is probably something to do with either not accepting something that can't be changed, or not accepting that the solution will involve you, looking at yourself. And so all of these things we're talking about are kind of interlinked, and it goes down to the level of, the mind body connection, I suppose, or the emotional relationship that people have with themselves.
Yeah, very good point, actually. Excellent point. Labeling as well helps in terms of admin, insurance, for example. So,
Wow.
yeah, you need to know what's wrong with this patient. Can they fly? Could they go abroad? Could they do this? Could they do that? So you need to have a clear black and white diagnosis. So that's part of the issue.
Wow.
But you mentioned another point about certainty. Yeah, I think people think doctors are kind of omnipotent, but actually, medicine's a science and an art as well. Because I used to think, years ago, the problem is just the human body is complex. That's why nothing is certain. But actually, my car broke down a few years ago, and some mechanic plugged it into the computer, and we got talking, and he said, depending on the kind of computer, the fault could be different. So,
Wow.
even though the car is like, a mechanical thing, it's not. You don't always get the right answer, even
Yeah,
with the
yeah,
computer.
yeah.
And if you call an IT department wherever you've worked, sometimes they'll say, turn it on, turn it off, do this, do that. They're trying and trying and trying. Even with that, there's trial and error, and we're not really
Mm,
sure.
mm,
So the body is even more complex. So there are going to be mistakes and things would happen, and the body doesn't. It's not a machine.
mm, mm.
So the way your symptoms manifest themselves. In fact, this is where coming back to functional medicine. So a patient could have the label of depression, but the
Mm,
root causes of the depression are different. So, for example, if
mm,
you had a clogged up liver, for example, and you can't excrete all the toxins, that could then accumulate in your body and cause depression.
mm, mm,
But
mm.
what if you have a chronic parasite that causes inflammation in your body and causes
Yeah.
brain inflammation? You'd also have depression. So two people have depression, but they have different root causes.
Mm, mm.
So that's another thing.
Yeah. And actually, it goes back to this idea that the mind body system is all one system, but the
Yeah.
medical model basically it doesn't see it as one system. It sees everything as been separate silos, like you said. So you'll have one
Yeah.
department for your kidney, you'll have another department for cardiology, whatever it is, etc. Everything is fragmented and looked at in isolation. But actually,
Yeah.
you need to look at the whole thing. And the whole thing actually is the link between the body and the mind. It's the link between the person who has that body and the mind and their society and their, the wider relationships that they have with the universe and all these things. It's a very intricate system that is ultimately connected to everything else, I think, because it's about the wholeness thing. But if we can only look at it through this myopic, fragmented lens of, okay, I'm just going to focus on your kidney or I'm just going to focus on your liver or whatever, then you're not going to get the best results.
Yeah. It's just how doctors are taught. So,
Mm,
but more and more discovering different ways of healing, and that's really improving now.
mm.
But yeah, it's just the way things are.
Yeah. And obviously that model does work to some extent. Like it keeps people alive and everything. But it's just, it can be harmful potentially to think that it is the best model ever and that we can't change things and be more holistic. So basically we've talked a lot about, the problems with the medical system and how doomed we all are. But what are some positive kind of changes that people can make in relation to all this stuff? So if somebody, has a health issue or they've got medically unexplained symptoms or stuff like
Mm.
that, what are just general things that people can generally do to tweak their lifestyles and start moving towards this natural state that you're talking about?
Oh, right. Yeah. So I kind of mentioned them before, which were
Mm-hmm.
your diet.
Yep.
So avoid processed food, things like gluten, refined vegetable oils, pasteurized dairy and sugar,
Mm,
things like that. Lifestyle change. So incorporate movement,
mm,
walking, dancing, going to the gym, cycling, and supplementation. For
mm,
example, vitamin D, vitamin C. There's so many supplements. That's a whole long discussion. Things like that. But also mastering the art of telling your story to a doctor. A
mm,
GP is about 10 minutes. So there's an acronym, mnemonic used by medical students for years. It's called Socrates. So it's a way of giving a history in a coherent manner regarding to pain. So Socrates stands for sight. So where is the pain? You've got tummy pain. O stands for onset. When does the pain start? Is it when you're asleep, when you're standing, when you're twisting? Character of the pain, that's C. Is it
mm,
sharp, dull? Is it kind of cramping in nature? R stands for radiation. Does the pain go to your toes, to your left leg, to your head? A stands for associated symptoms. Do you feel nauseous when you get the pain? And T is timing. How long does the pain last? Does it come in
wow.
bouts and stop? And E is exacerbating symptoms. Does the pain get worse when you lie down or when you bend? And the final S is severity on a scale of 1 to 10. We normally say 10 is childbirth if it's a woman. If it's a woman. Yeah.
That's supposed to be the worst pain, isn't it, on the planet?
Yeah. Childbirth is supposed to be the worst pain. Or renal kidney stones, apparently, as well.
Yeah, I've heard that as well, actually. But anyway, so what we're saying with this Socrates acronym is that ultimately is a thing we can learn to do to get around some of these issues we talked about, is just learn to communicate more effectively, I guess, or in a more real way.
In a very concise manner. Yeah.
Wow. Sorry, I got you to repeat yourself there with the the nutrition, lifestyle, and supplementation.
Different way.
Yeah. We've been talking quite a while. We've covered a lot, obviously. If you were going to sum up this conversation and give some final words of wisdom to people, what would you say? And also, when you've done that, can you let people know where they can find you online and that kind of thing?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. So most health happens outside the doctor's office. So do as much as you can. Your health is within your control. So eat well, exercise, and supplement when needed. And you can find me at guthealthmedic.co.uk, it's website, or Instagram at guthealthmedic, or I'm now on TikTok at guthealthmedic.
Brilliant. So I'll share all those links in the show notes and all those kind of places. But Leke, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all this information with me and everyone that was listening. And really appreciate it. It's been awesome.
Thank you so much. Just one last thing. I actually do online courses now. So they're very short courses on how to boost your immune system, how to stop sugar cravings, and how to manage stress to prevent it from kind of consuming your body. They got on the website. Yeah.
So that's what did you say it was? Sorry, gut health doctor.
Guthealthmedic.co.uk.
Sorry.
Gut Health Medic,
I will share that 6,000,000% on the show notes. But yeah, thank you again so much. It's been really good.
Thank you.